You canceled my trip? I asked, my voice shaking. You were never invited. My dad laughed. In that moment, everything I had buried for 29 years crashed down on me. I wasn't just forgotten anymore, I was erased. For weeks, I had been saving, planning, and dreaming about finally being part of something with my family. And with one cruel laugh, my father reminded me that I was never really one of them. My name is Rachel Monroe, and this is the story of how a daughter they tried to silence found the strength to fight back. If my story stirs something in you, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because here on Hidden Family Revenge Stories, we uncover the raw truth about betrayal, revenge, and the fight to finally be heard. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. I grew up in a small suburban house in Michigan, where from the outside everything looked perfect. But inside those walls, there was always a clear message. Ethan was the golden boy. Chloe was the baby princess. And I was just the extra. I grew up in a 2-story suburban house in Michigan, the kind of place that looked picture perfect from the outside. Green lawns, white picket fences, neighbors waving at each other on Saturday mornings. To anyone driving by, we must have looked like the ideal American family. But inside that house, the truth was very different. From the very beginning, I knew exactly where I stood in the family. Ethan was the golden boy. Chloe was the baby princess. And I was the extra. The leftover. The child who didn't quite fit anywhere. My bedroom was at the very end of the hallway next to the laundry room. It was the smallest room in the house, barely big enough for a bed, a dresser, and a desk that my father had picked up at a garage sale. The wallpaper had started to peel in one corner, and the carpet still had a faint stain from when the previous owners had spilled paint. Meanwhile, Ethan's room was a shrine to his interests. Every year, he got the latest gaming system, posters of his favorite football team framed on the wall, and a brand new desk with a swivel chair. Chloe's room looked like something out of a magazine. Pastel colors, a canopy bed, shelves filled with dolls, and curtains my mother had custom ordered. I told myself it didn't matter, but deep down I knew that even our rooms told the truth. I wasn't as valued. Birthdays were another reminder. I'll never forget my 8th birthday. I sat at the kitchen table that morning waiting for someone to say, "Happy birthday." My mom rushed around packing Chloe's dance bag. My dad scanned the newspaper. Ethan complained about practice. No one said a word. By the time dinner rolled around, I finally worked up the courage to remind them. My mom gasped, slapped her hand over her mouth, and promised we'd do something next weekend. My dad just shrugged and said, "It's not a big deal." Next weekend came and went. Nothing happened. That same year, Ethan got a 3-day birthday celebration, complete with a barbecue, a sleepover with his friends, and a new bike with a bow on it. Chloe got a party at a rented venue with balloons, cake, and a clown. I got nothing. It wasn't just birthdays. Holidays told the same story. At Christmas, I would unwrap gifts still in shopping bags with the price tags attached. A sweater a size too big, a book I hadn't asked for. Ethan got sports gear. Chloe got whatever was on her wish list. My presents always felt like an afterthought, something thrown in the cart at the last minute. And I learned to smile and say thank you, because complaining only made me feel more invisible. Even in family photos, the truth was obvious. Our living room walls were lined with frames of Ethan holding trophies, Chloe in her recital costumes. My achievements, a science fair win, a perfect report card, barely made it to a dusty shelf. Sometimes I'd move the frame forward just to see if anyone noticed. They never did. Those early years carved something into me that never quite faded. I learned not to expect much, not to speak up, and not to believe I was worthy of the same love my siblings got so freely. I became the quiet one, the girl who blended into the background of her own family. And the saddest part was that at the time, I thought that was normal. As I got older, the pattern only grew clearer. By the time I was in middle school, I realized that in my family, effort didn't matter. At least not mine. Ethan could stumble and still be celebrated. Chloe could fail and still be praised. But me? I could move mountains and it was never enough. I remember the first time I brought home a perfect report card in 6th grade. All A's. I had worked so hard for it, staying up late, reviewing notes until my eyes blurred. When the teacher handed me that paper, I felt like maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally look at me with pride. I placed it on the kitchen counter that night, right where they couldn't miss it. And then, nothing. It sat there for 3 days without a word. No good job, no hug, not even a glance. On the 4th day, my mom picked it up, skimmed it, and said, "That's nice, Rachel. Now could you set the table for dinner?" I felt my stomach drop. Meanwhile, Ethan came home a week later with a B+ in math. Just 1 grade below an A, and my parents nearly had a meltdown. My dad took him out for dinner, telling him, "Don't be too hard on yourself, son. We know how smart you are." They acted like he had suffered some great tragedy. The message was clear. Ethan's struggles mattered more than my victories. It was the same with Chloe. She never liked math. In 1 semester, she barely scraped by with a C-. You'd think she had discovered the cure for cancer by the way my parents reacted. "We're so proud of you, sweetie." My mom gushed. "You kept trying, and that's what matters." They praised her perseverance for weeks. And me? I sat there wondering why no one ever noticed the nights I stayed up until midnight. The hours I spent studying while babysitting myself because everyone else was too busy with Ethan's football or Chloe's ballet. Then there was the science fair. I still remember the feeling of standing on stage, holding the blue ribbon for first place at the state level. I had built a project about renewable energy that even local news reporters came to see. For a brief moment, I felt like maybe this would be it. The thing that made them finally proud of me. At the award ceremony, I scanned the crowd for familiar faces. My parents weren't there. They had driven Chloe to a recital instead. When I got home, ribbon in hand, my dad muttered, "Good work," without looking up from the TV. My mom hung the ribbon in a tiny frame and placed it behind some decorative vases on the bookshelf. Weeks later, I caught myself moving it forward, hoping someone would notice. They never did. Meanwhile, Ethan's football jerseys were framed on the living room wall like works of art. Chloe's dance photos covered entire shelves. My blue ribbon became just another piece of clutter they ignored. With each of these moments, the truth dug deeper into my heart. No matter how hard I tried, I would always be invisible in my own family. The harder I worked, the clearer it became that my effort didn't mean anything to them. It was like I was shouting into a void, and the silence hurt more than any harsh word ever could. After years of being overlooked in school, I thought maybe I could at least find comfort in my mother's arms. Deep down, I still believed that if anyone could see me, it would be her. But I was wrong. Every time I reached for her love, she reminded me that even in her eyes, I wasn't worth the same tenderness my siblings received. I remember one night in middle school. I had just gotten home from the science fair, still clutching that first-place ribbon that no one seemed to care about. Chloe was sprawled out on the couch. Ethan had taken over the TV, and my dad was snoring in his recliner. I quietly slipped into the kitchen where Mom was washing dishes. I wanted so badly to hear her say she was proud, to feel her arms around me. I held the ribbon out and whispered, "Mom, look, I won." She barely glanced at it before turning back to the sink. "That's nice, honey," she said. "Can you be a dear and take out the trash?" My chest tightened. I wanted to scream that it wasn't just nice, that it was important. But instead, I nodded, shoved the ribbon in my pocket, and did as she asked. Mom wasn't cruel in the way my father could be. She didn't laugh at me or dismiss me outright. Her cruelty was quieter, more subtle, but it cut deeper. She had this way of saying, "You're strong, Rachel. You don't need the same attention Ethan or Chloe do." At first, I thought it was a compliment. Maybe she really believed I was capable. But the older I got, the more I realized what it really meant. She was excusing herself from ever having to care about me. She saw my strength as an excuse to ignore me. There were nights I'd stand outside her bedroom door, listening to her coo over Chloe, helping her pick out outfits for a recital or brushing her hair before bed. Sometimes I'd even whisper to myself, pretending she was doing the same for me. I can still remember the sting of realizing that those moments would never come. When I asked her once, "Why don't you ever sit with me like you do with Chloe?" She smiled faintly and said, "Because you don't need it." You've always been the independent one. I carried those words like chains. And with Ethan, she was just as invested. She'd sit at the table for hours, helping him with homework, writing checks for tutors, driving him to practices across the state. With me, it was always, "You'll figure it out, Rachel. You're smart enough," that was her mantra. I'll never forget one winter when I was drowning in assignments and begged her for help on a history project. She looked up from the bill she was paying and said, "You don't need me. You're tougher than you think." I wanted to cry right there. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and spent the night working alone in my freezing little room, my hands stiff from the cold because our heater never reached the end of the hallway. The worst part wasn't the neglect itself. It was the way I started to believe her words. I began to tell myself that needing love was weakness, that asking for comfort made me pathetic. I became the girl who never cried in front of anyone, who swallowed her feelings and built a shell around her heart. On the outside, I looked like the independent daughter my mother claimed me to be. On the inside, I was a child screaming to be seen. By the time I reached high school, I had stopped expecting my mother's comfort. I buried that part of myself so deep that even I couldn't find it anymore. Instead, I focused on achievement, telling myself that maybe if I worked hard enough, the results would speak for me. Maybe grades, awards, or milestones would finally force them to notice me. But milestones came and went, and the silence remained. My high school graduation was one of the clearest examples. I had spent years pouring everything I had into my studies, working part-time at a coffee shop just to save for college. Walking across that stage, hearing my name called, was supposed to be the moment my family finally looked at me with pride. I searched the crowd for them, imagining my mom waving or my dad clapping. But when I found their seats, they were empty. Later, I learned they had taken Chloe to some art exhibition across town. She had been looking forward to it for months, my mom explained, as if that made it better. We had dinner together a week later at a chain restaurant. No balloons, no cake, just a passing congratulations. Meanwhile, when Ethan graduated, they threw a backyard party with dozens of relatives, catered food, and a banner with his name in bold letters. It wasn't just milestones. It seeped into every corner of my personal life. When I finally found the courage to bring home someone I cared about, a kind, hardworking guy named Daniel, I thought maybe, just maybe, they would see me as an adult with their own choices. Instead, dinner turned into humiliation. My father asked him what his father did for a living, and when Daniel said he worked as a mechanic, my dad chuckled and said, "So you're not planning on marrying up, Rachel?" My mother forced a tight smile but added, "You can do better, sweetie." Chloe snickered the entire night, whispering things under her breath. I wanted to disappear. After that, Daniel pulled away from me, and I couldn't blame him. Who would want to tie themselves to a family like mine? But the worst came when Ethan's recklessness became everyone else's burden. He had dropped out of college after 2 years, but decided he wanted to be his own boss. My parents were thrilled by his big dreams of starting a business, even though he had no plan, no savings, nothing. One night at the dinner table, my father slid a stack of papers across to me. "You'll co-sign this loan for Ethan," he said like it was already decided. My hands trembled as I read the numbers. Tens of thousands of dollars. Money I didn't have. Money that could destroy me if Ethan failed. I looked up at him, stunned. "Dad, I can't. I'm barely keeping up with my own bills." His jaw tightened. "Family helps family. Or don't you care about your brother's future?" My mother chimed in. "You're the responsible one, Rachel." "That's why we can trust you." I wanted to scream that being the responsible one wasn't a compliment. It was a curse. It meant they expected me to sacrifice while Ethan and Chloe coasted through life. It meant I was nothing but a safety net, a backup plan, never a daughter to be cherished. That night I refused, but the guilt weighed on me for weeks. My parents acted like I had betrayed them, like my only value was what I could give up for someone else. Each of these moments carved deeper scars. They weren't accidents. They were choices. Repeated choices to put Ethan and Chloe above me. By the time I packed my bags for college, I wasn't just leaving home, I was escaping. And yet, even as I drove away, a part of me still whispered that maybe one day, they would finally see me. By the time I packed for college, the walls of that Michigan house felt like a prison closing in on me. Every corner held a memory of being overlooked. Every hallway echoed with reminders of how little I mattered. I thought leaving would feel like freedom, like cutting off heavy chains. But as I loaded my secondhand suitcases into the back of a borrowed pickup truck, all I felt was a strange mix of relief and grief. My parents didn't cry. They didn't even walk me to the truck. They were busy helping Ethan prepare for a weekend football tournament and Chloe for her upcoming recital. "Good luck, Rachel," my mom said from the kitchen doorway, her voice distant as if I were just going on a short trip instead of leaving home for good. My dad barely looked up from the newspaper. Ethan smirked and said, "Don't screw it up." Chloe just giggled. "Don't forget us when you're a big nurse someday." Her words dripping with mockery. It was my best friend, Sophie, who climbed into the driver's seat and grinned at me like I was about to conquer the world. "They don't see it yet, Rach," she said, tightening her grip on the wheel. "But one day they will. One day they'll regret every single time they ignored you." Her words sank into me, a fragile lifeline I clung to as we pulled out of the driveway. College was hard. I worked night shifts at a convenience store, studied during breaks, and stretched every dollar until it nearly tore in half. I lived on ramen noodles and black coffee, but I survived. And for the first time, I felt something my family never gave me: pride in myself. When I graduated with honors, I thought surely this would be the moment. Surely my parents would see me now. I called them the day I got my nursing license, excitement bubbling in my voice. "Mom, I did it. I passed." "That's nice, dear," she said before changing the subject to Chloe's art show. That familiar ache returned, sharp as ever. But instead of breaking me, it hardened something inside. If my own parents couldn't see my worth, then maybe I didn't need their approval to begin with. Still, a small part of me, a foolish, stubborn part, kept waiting for them to turn around to finally say, "We're proud of you, Rachel." I built a modest life in New York. A one-bedroom apartment with thrift store furniture, a few potted plants, and the kind of silence that felt safe rather than suffocating. My job at the pediatric unit gave me purpose. The children's laughter, their tiny hands clutching mine, reminded me that love could exist in the smallest of gestures. Sophie stayed by my side, calling me every week, reminding me that family isn't always blood. And yet, even as I built this fragile new world, the old wounds never fully healed. I still sent gifts for birthdays, still called home on holidays, still drove back to Michigan when I could spare the time. Every trip ended the same. Me returning to New York exhausted, emotionally drained, but carrying the faint hope that maybe next time things would be different. I didn't know then that the breaking point was coming. That one careless Instagram post would shatter the last thread I was holding on to. And when it did, the quiet girl who always swallowed her pain would finally snap. It started with a single photo. I was sitting in the staff lounge at the hospital, scrolling through Instagram during a rare, quiet moment. That's when Chloe's post popped up. A picture of her suitcases lined up by the door, bright floral luggage tags dangling from the handles. The caption read, "Family trip to Hawaii. Can't wait for the sun and waves." For a second, my thumb froze on the screen. My heart did that strange flip, half excitement, half dread. Hawaii, a family trip. I stared at the word family over and over, letting it sink in. Part of me wanted to believe that this time was different. That maybe they had simply forgotten to tell me. That maybe, after all these years of being pushed aside, I was finally included. The thought lit something inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I could already picture it. Lounging on the beach with Ethan and Chloe, laughing over dinner, maybe even hearing my dad say something kind for once. It felt fragile, like holding a soap bubble that could burst with the slightest touch. But I clung to it anyway. That evening, I went home and pulled out a notepad. I started writing a list. Sunscreen, swimsuits, sandals. A summer dress I had never bought because I never had anywhere to wear it. I circled the dates on my work calendar and approached my supervisor the next morning. "I'd like to request vacation time," I said, my voice tinged with a nervous kind of excitement. She raised her eyebrows, but she smiled and signed the form. I even opened a separate envelope and began tucking away part of my paycheck each week. Rent, bills, and groceries came first, as always. But whatever was left went into that envelope labeled Hawaii. Just seeing the word written there made me smile. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I was moving towards something that wasn't just about survival. It was about belonging. I told Sophie about it over coffee one Saturday morning. She looked at me carefully, the way she always did when she wanted to say something but held back. "Rach, are you sure they invited you?" she asked gently. I laughed, brushing her concern aside. "They said family trip." "I'm family, aren't I?" My voice wavered at the end, but I didn't let it show. Over the next few days, I found myself daydreaming during my shifts. I imagined the ocean breeze, the scent of hibiscus flowers, the sound of waves crashing against the shore. For once, I pictured myself in the memory, not left out of it. And late at night, lying in bed, I whispered to myself, "This time will be different." Looking back, I realized I was clinging to a fantasy. But in that moment, that small spark of hope was everything to me. It kept me moving forward, blind to the storm that was already building. A week later, I finally worked up the courage to call my dad. I told myself it was just a simple question. Flight details, hotel check-in, maybe a car rental. Nothing complicated. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, but in my heart there was still that fragile bubble of hope, glowing faintly. "Hello?" His voice was gruff, distracted. "Hi, Dad. It's me." I saw Chloe's post about Hawaii. I forced a smile into my tone, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't holding my breath. "I just need the flight information so I can get my ticket. And maybe the hotel name?" For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard it. The sound of my father's laugh. Low at first, then sharper, cutting straight through me. "You?" he said between chuckles. "Rachel, you were never invited." The room around me seemed to spin. I gripped the edge of the counter just to stay upright. What do you mean? I whispered, my throat tightening. It's a family trip, isn't it? I'm family. That trip is for your mother, Ethan, and Chloe, he said flatly. Real family. You don't just invite yourself into things you were never part of. Real family. The words sliced deeper than any insult I'd ever heard. In that single sentence, he had erased me, not just from a vacation, but from the very definition of family itself. Every forgotten birthday, every empty seat at my graduations, every dismissive shrug from my parents came crashing back at once. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him how many nights I had stayed up saving for this trip, how I had circled the dates on my calendar, how I had whispered to myself, this time will be different. But the words caught in my throat, tangled in years of silence. Dad, my voice cracked. I just wanted to be included. Another laugh, harsher this time. Rachel, don't embarrass yourself. We're going to have a good time without the drama. You'll be fine on your own, like always. Then he hung up. The dial tone rang in my ear, hollow and cold. I stared at my phone, my chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. The envelope labeled Hawaii sat on the counter beside me, stuffed with bills I had scraped together. My fingers brushed over it, and the bubble of hope inside me burst. I sank to the floor, the silence of my apartment pressing down like a weight. For weeks, I had dreamed of finally being part of something, finally hearing my dad say I belonged. And with one cruel laugh, he reminded me that I never would. But in that silence, something inside me shifted. For the first time, the pain didn't just sit heavy in my chest. It sparked into anger. A dangerous, simmering anger that whispered, if they don't see you as family, then maybe it's time to stop playing the forgotten child. I don't remember how long I sat on that kitchen floor after my father hung up. Minutes? Hours? All I know is that my body felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left nothing but the echo of his laugh. Real family. The words pulsed in my head, mocking me. At some point, I stood up, numb but restless, pacing the room like a caged animal. My eyes fell on the envelope marked Hawaii, the one I had so carefully filled with weeks of savings. I picked it up, stared at the bold black letters, and felt rage rise in my chest. I had been planning for a trip I was never even meant to be part of. That was when it hit me. I knew my father's password. He wasn't exactly creative. He'd been using the same combination of names and dates for years. I remembered it clearly because as a teenager, I had once used it to print something from the family computer. My pulse quickened as the thought formed. I opened my laptop, hands trembling, and typed in the airline website. For a moment, I hesitated. This was insane. This was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But then I heard his laugh in my head again, that cruel, dismissive laugh, and my hesitation evaporated. I entered the password, Ethan Chloe 2000. The screen blinked, then opened. There it was, the itinerary. 4 tickets to Honolulu, a luxury resort booked for 10 days, a rental SUV waiting at the airport. The total stared back at me. Almost $30,000. I could almost see them there already, sipping cocktails by the pool, laughing about how pathetic I was. My chest burned. I clicked on the cancel reservation button. A warning popped up. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. My finger hovered over the trackpad, shaking. For 29 years, I had swallowed every slight, every rejection, every reminder that I wasn't enough. I had stayed quiet, invisible, because that's what they wanted. Not this time. I pressed confirm. One by one, I canceled the flights, the resort booking, the car rental. With each click, my heart pounded harder. It was reckless, dangerous, and I knew the fallout would be brutal. But for the first time, I felt powerful. For the first time, they would know what it felt like to be excluded, blindsided, erased. When the last confirmation email landed in the inbox, I leaned back in my chair, my whole body shaking. A laugh escaped my lips. Not the bitter kind my father had thrown at me, but a raw, almost hysterical release. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered to myself, "Now you'll know how it feels." But beneath that fleeting rush of satisfaction, fear crept in. I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. My phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating with the first of many incoming calls. My father's name flashed on the screen, then my mother's, then Ethan's. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the chaos I had unleashed, my heart caught between terror and a strange, intoxicating relief. For once, I wasn't the forgotten daughter. For once, I had taken control. The calls didn't stop. For hours, my phone buzzed across the counter like a trapped insect, vibrating with anger I could almost feel through the screen. I ignored them all, sitting in silence, waiting for the storm to break. And when it finally did, it came crashing down harder than I ever imagined. The first voicemail was from my father. His voice was sharp, laced with fury. "Rachel, what the hell did you do? Do you have any idea how much money you just cost us? You think this is a joke? You think you can humiliate me like this? I swear to God, if you don't fix this, you're no daughter of mine." The second was from my mother. Her tone was softer, but no less cutting. "Rachel, sweetheart, I don't know what's gotten into you. This isn't you. People are saying you've been unstable for years, and now you've proven them right. You're sick, Rachel. Please, before you ruin your life completely, apologize. We can make this go away if you just admit you were wrong." Her words dripped with guilt and manipulation, the same poison I had swallowed since childhood. Then came Ethan. His voice was smug, almost gleeful. "Nice going, sis. You finally proved what I've been telling everyone, that you're jealous, bitter, and completely out of control. Don't worry, though. I already told people at the gym what you did." They had a good laugh. By the time Chloe called, I was shaking. She didn't even bother with pretense. "You're pathetic, Rachel. Do you even realize how ridiculous you are? You think canceling our trip makes you powerful? All it proves is that you'll always be the bitter outsider. Congrats! You finally ruined something bigger than yourself." Her laugh at the end echoed my father's, cruel and dismissive. But the worst blow wasn't their words. It was the way they twisted the narrative. By the next morning, whispers had already spread through our extended family. A cousin messaged me. "Your mom said you've been having breakdowns. Is that true?" My aunt posted some vague status on Facebook about family members who sabotage others out of jealousy. And then, at work, a colleague approached me awkwardly. "Hey, Rachel, I saw something Ethan posted online. Are you okay?" I felt my stomach drop. My private rebellion had been dragged into the open, repainted as madness. My father threatened to cut me from the will. My mother framed me as unstable. Ethan mocked me publicly. And Chloe poured salt into every wound. They didn't just want me to regret what I had done. They wanted to destroy my credibility, to erase any chance that someone might see me as the victim. Sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling through the damage, I realized something chilling. My entire family, the people who were supposed to protect me, had declared war. And if I didn't stand my ground, they would bury me beneath their lies. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the forgotten child. I was the enemy. I thought ignoring their calls would buy me time, but my family was never good at letting things go. 3 days after I canceled the trip, I came home from a late shift to find them waiting outside my apartment building. My stomach dropped the moment I saw them. My father pacing like a caged bull. My mother wringing her hands theatrically. Ethan leaning against the wall with that smug smirk. And Chloe scrolling on her phone as if the whole thing was just another joke. I froze on the sidewalk, keys clutched in my hand. Every instinct told me to run, but something stronger held me in place. For the first time in years, I didn't want to be the one who backed down. So I walked past them, up the steps, and unlocked my door. "You might as well come in," I said quietly. The second the door shut behind us, the storm broke. My father's voice thundered through the tiny apartment. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Rachel? $30,000 down the drain, our entire vacation ruined. You've embarrassed this family beyond repair." He slammed his fist on my kitchen table so hard a mug rattled off the edge and shattered. My mother jumped in, tears streaming down her face, though her voice was sharp as glass. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Do you hate us that much?" I laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done for me? You mean forgetting my birthdays, skipping my graduation, humiliating me in front of people I cared about? If that's your version of love, then yes, I guess I'm ungrateful." Ethan scoffed, crossing his arms. "This isn't about your pity party, Rachel. You cost us real money. You're going to pay it back." Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the envelope marked Hawaii from the counter and threw it at him. Crumpled bills spilled across the floor. "That's what I saved to go on this trip. Every dollar I scraped together while you blew through Dad's money and failed at everything handed to you. And you still think I owe you?" Chloe finally looked up from her phone, her eyes gleaming with contempt. "You're just jealous, Rachel. You always have been. That's why you're alone in this sad little apartment while the rest of us have each other." Her words cut deep, but I stood my ground. My voice shook, but it didn't break. "Jealous? Number, I wanted a family. I wanted to matter. But you made sure I never did. And now you know how it feels to be excluded, erased, forgotten." For a moment, the room went silent. My father's face turned red. His fists clenched, but he didn't strike me. My mother sobbed harder, whispering about betrayal. Ethan muttered curses under his breath, and Chloe rolled her eyes. One by one, they filed out of my apartment, slamming the door behind them. I stood there in the silence, my body trembling, my heart racing. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But for the first time in my life, I hadn't let them crush me. I had faced them head on. And even though the cost would be high, I knew something had changed forever. The silence in my apartment after they left felt heavier than their shouting. I thought maybe, just maybe, standing up to them would give me some relief. Instead, the real punishment was only beginning. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my father's lawyer. Cold, formal words stared back at me. "You are liable for financial damages caused by your actions. We will pursue repayment through legal channels if necessary." My stomach twisted. $30,000, more than I made in a year, even working double shifts. I sat at the kitchen table, the screen glowing in front of me, and felt the weight of a trap I hadn't seen coming. Then came my mother's letters. Not handwritten, not gentle. Typed emails filled with accusations. "Rachel, you need help. Everyone can see how unstable you've become. Please, before you destroy your life completely, admit your mistake." She painted me as the problem, the sick one, the broken one. And she didn't just send those messages to me. Somehow my aunt in Ohio and my cousins in Texas received them too. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me, some with pity, others with disgust. Ethan, of course, took it further. He posted on Facebook about how some people in the family couldn't handle seeing others happy. His friends piled on with comments about jealousy and immaturity. Then he shared a screenshot of my cancellation confirmation, my private email, captioned, "Proof my sister tried to ruin our lives." By lunchtime, people at work had seen it. A nurse in my unit asked quietly, "Rachel, are you okay?" The shame burned hotter than any insult. Chloe didn't bother hiding behind subtleties. She texted me directly, "You finally showed your true colors. Congrats. You'll die alone." I stared at the message for a long time, my chest aching before deleting it. But her words lingered, carving into me like scars. Within a week, I felt completely cut off. My phone was full of voicemails I couldn't bear to hear, my social media flooded with whispers, my apartment heavy with silence. Even walking into work felt different. I caught colleagues exchanging glances, lowering their voices when I passed by. It was as if my family's narrative had seeped into every corner of my life, painting me as the unstable, bitter daughter who finally snapped. One night, Sophie came over with takeout, and I broke down for the first time since the call with my dad. "They've erased me," I whispered through tears. "Not just from their lives. Now they're erasing me everywhere." She squeezed my hand and said softly, "Then maybe it's time to stop trying to prove yourself to people who will never see you." Her words were a lifeline, but I couldn't accept them yet. I was too raw, too wounded. I had always been the forgotten child. Now, I wasn't just forgotten. I was branded. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, one truth settled heavy in my chest. If I didn't take control of my own story, they would finish destroying me. The days after the confrontation in my apartment blurred together like one long gray shadow. I went through the motions, waking up, going to work, coming home. But it felt like I was sleepwalking through someone else's life. The air in my apartment was thick with silence, and every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted into knots. I didn't even need to look anymore. I knew it was them. My father's fury, my mother's guilt-laced accusations, Ethan's smug taunts, Chloe's venom. Each voicemail was another dagger, and I didn't have the strength to pull them out. At the hospital, whispers followed me down the hall. Some of my coworkers had seen Ethan's post, others had heard through relatives of relatives. A few offered polite smiles, but I could feel the weight of their judgment in the way conversations stopped when I walked into a room. I had always been the steady one, the reliable nurse who kept her head down and did the work. Now, in their eyes, I was something else. The unstable sister, the jealous one, the girl who snapped. Nights were the worst. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, the glow of the street lamp seeping through my blinds. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed every word from that night in my apartment. My father's roar, "You've embarrassed this family beyond repair." My mother's tears, "How could you do this to us?" Chloe's mocking laugh, Ethan's demand that I pay them back. It was like an endless loop, each voice louder than the last, until my chest tightened and I felt like I couldn't breathe. More than once, I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over my father's number. I imagined myself apologizing, begging for forgiveness, promising to fix everything. Maybe if I said the right words, they would take me back. Maybe the silence would end. But then I remembered his laugh on the phone. "You were never invited." And my thumb froze. I couldn't forget the way they had looked at me in my own apartment, like I was a stranger invading their space. Calling them wouldn't bring me home. It would only chain me back to the same pain. Food lost its taste. I picked at meals, barely noticing when Sophie dropped off groceries. My plants wilted on the windowsill, unwatered. The envelope labeled Hawaii still sat on the counter, crumpled and empty, a mocking reminder of dreams that had turned to ash. Even the little things, my favorite TV shows, the sound of music, felt foreign, like they belonged to someone who no longer existed. What cut the deepest wasn't their anger. It was their erasure. My father's threats, my mother's rumors, Ethan's public shaming. They all had the same goal: to strip away my voice until no one would believe me, until even I stopped believing myself. And some nights, it worked. I'd sit on the floor of my bedroom, my arms wrapped around my knees, whispering to the dark. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am broken. Maybe I really don't belong anywhere. But then there were moments, small flickers, when something inside me fought back. I would remember the way my hands had steadied a sick child in the ER, the way their tiny fingers clung to mine as if I were the only safe place in the world. I'd think of Sophie, showing up with coffee when I couldn't drag myself out of bed, her eyes full of quiet faith in me. Those moments reminded me that I wasn't just the role my family had forced on me. I was more. Still, the battle inside me raged. Half of me longed to surrender, to crawl back into their good graces no matter the cost. The other half whispered that maybe, just maybe, this exile was a chance to finally break free. But freedom felt terrifying. What if they were right? What if without them, I was nothing? One night, as rain tapped against the window, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the glow of my laptop. The legal email from my father's lawyer was still open, cold and threatening. My reflection stared back at me in the screen. Tired eyes, tear-stained cheeks, hair pulled back in a messy knot. I barely recognized the woman looking back. She wasn't the forgotten little girl anymore. She wasn't even the bitter, angry daughter who had canceled a trip. She was someone caught in between, clinging to the edges of who she used to be, afraid to step into who she might become. And in that moment, I realized, if I didn't fight for myself now, no one ever would. The night I admitted to myself that no one would fight for me unless I did, I still didn't know where to begin. It felt like staring at a mountain from the bottom, my legs too weak to climb, my lungs too tight to breathe. The next morning, Sophie showed up at my apartment without warning. She didn't knock gently. She banged on the door until I opened it, hair a mess, still in the same pajamas I had worn for days. Her eyes softened the second she saw me. "Rach," she whispered, pushing past me into the living room. She looked around at the empty takeout containers, the half-dead plants, the unopened mail. "This isn't you." I wanted to argue, to tell her that maybe this was me now, the broken version my family had always described. But instead, I just sank onto the couch, tears welling up. Sophie sat beside me, pulling me into her arms like I was a child again. For the first time in weeks, I let myself sob into someone's shoulder. When I finally quieted, she spoke gently but firmly. "You can't keep doing this alone. You need help, real help. And not from them, from someone who can actually see you." I shook my head. "Therapy? My mom's already telling everyone I'm unstable. If I go, won't that just prove her right?" Sophie tilted my chin until I met her eyes. "No, it proves she's wrong. Because getting help isn't weakness, Rachel. It's strength. And you deserve to heal," her words lodged in my chest. For so long, strength had meant swallowing my pain, pretending I didn't need anyone. But what if strength meant something else? What if it meant daring to open the door I had slammed shut years ago? 2 weeks later, I found myself in a quiet office with soft lighting and shelves lined with books. Dr. Patel was nothing like I expected. She didn't prod, didn't pry. She just waited, her calm presence filling the silence until I found the courage to speak. At first, my words stumbled out awkwardly. Half sentences, nervous laughs, long pauses. I told her about the trip, about canceling it, about the backlash. I braced myself for judgment, but it never came. She simply nodded, her voice steady. It sounds like you've been carrying a very heavy burden for a very long time. The dam cracked. Suddenly, I was spilling everything. The forgotten birthdays, the empty seats at graduations, the ridicule of my first love, the night in my apartment when they all stood against me. By the end, my throat was raw, my face streaked with tears. Dr. Patel leaned forward, her tone gentle but precise. Rachel, what you've experienced is a form of emotional neglect. In families where one child is favored, the others often become what we call the forgotten child. You learn to survive by being quiet, by being independent, because no one gave you permission to need anything. And when you finally broke that pattern, by canceling the trip, you threatened the system they built around you. That's why their reaction was so extreme. Her words landed like truth I had always known but never named. Forgotten child. The phrase sliced me open, yet stitched something together at the same time. For years, I had believed I was invisible because I wasn't good enough. But what if I had been invisible because they chose not to see me? Tears blurred my vision again. All I ever wanted was to be loved like them. To be enough. Dr. Patel's voice was warm, unwavering. Rachel, you were always enough. Their blindness doesn't define your worth. I sat there, letting her words settle into the cracks my family had left. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the sum of my parents' neglect or my siblings' cruelty. I was someone who had survived despite it. Someone who could begin to heal. The sessions didn't magically fix everything. There were days I left feeling raw, days when old doubts crept back in. But slowly, something shifted. I stopped checking my phone for their messages. I started watering my plants again, cooking meals that actually tasted like food. I looked in the mirror and began to recognize the woman staring back. Not the forgotten child, not the bitter outcast, but a person worthy of care. One evening after therapy, Sophie and I sat on my balcony, the city buzzing below us. I told her about Dr. Patel's words, about being the forgotten child. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Maybe they forgot you, Rach. But I never did. And you don't have to forget yourself anymore either. Her words brought fresh tears, but this time they weren't just from pain. They were from hope. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of something my family could never give me, the belief that I mattered. The more I sat with Dr. Patel's words, the more a quiet strength began to take root inside me. For the first time, I saw my family's cruelty for what it was, a choice. They had chosen to erase me, chosen to diminish me, chosen to scapegoat me when I finally fought back. And if they could make those choices, then so could I. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper in front of me. The cursor on my laptop blinked like a heartbeat, daring me to begin. I knew I couldn't face them in person. Not yet. But I could write. So I started typing. The letter poured out of me like water breaking through a dam. Mom, Dad, I know you see me as the problem. For years, you've called me the jealous one, the bitter one, the unstable one. But here's the truth. I was the forgotten one. I spent my entire life trying to earn your love, and every time I reached for it, you pushed me further away. Canceling that trip wasn't about ruining your happiness. It was about finally refusing to accept the role you forced on me. I will not apologize for standing up for myself. If you want me in your lives, it will be on different terms. Terms where I am seen, respected, and valued. If you can't accept that, then this will be my goodbye. I read the words over and over, my hands trembling. Then I hit print, folded the pages, and slipped them into an envelope. Dropping it into the mailbox that night felt like exhaling after holding my breath for decades. For once, I wasn't begging them to love me. I was demanding they either love me right, or not at all. A week passed before I heard back. The response wasn't from my parents, but from my grandmother, who called me one Sunday afternoon. Her voice, soft and frail, cracked as she said, "Rachel, I read your letter. I believe you. And I want you to know, I always saw you. I'm sorry I didn't do more to protect you." Tears slid down my cheeks as I whispered, "Thank you." For the first time, someone in my bloodline acknowledged the truth. Not long after, my Aunt Carol reached out too. She told me she had watched for years as I was pushed aside, but every time she spoke up, she was shut down. "You don't deserve this," she said, "and you're not alone." But it wasn't just family by blood who showed up. Sophie was there every step of the way, reminding me of my worth. A few colleagues from work invited me to dinner, laughing with me like I belonged. Even the barista at the coffee shop near my apartment began to remember my order and ask about my day. Little by little, I realized that family could look different. That love could come from people who chose me, not people who happened to share my DNA. The shift was slow but profound. For years, I had told myself I didn't need anyone. Now, I began to understand that needing people wasn't weakness. It was life. I started accepting invitations, letting people in, allowing myself to be cared for. And in those moments, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: safety. Of course, my parents didn't change. My father sent one curt email: "We don't negotiate with children who betray us." My mother's silence was louder than any words. Ethan and Chloe unfriended me online, erasing me from their curated images of family. But instead of breaking me, their rejection freed me. I no longer had to twist myself into knots, begging for scraps of love. I had drawn a line, and standing on my side of it, I felt taller than I ever had. One night, sitting with Sophie and a few new friends around my small dining table, I looked around at the laughter, the warmth, the easy way they included me. My chest ached, not with pain, but with gratitude. This, I thought, this is what family is supposed to feel like. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was the family I had chosen. And maybe that was even better. The letter to my parents had been sent, the silence from them deafening, and yet I didn't feel broken anymore. For the first time in my life, their rejection didn't crush me. It clarified me. I no longer needed to chase their love. Still, the ache lingered, a hollow space where belonging should have been. I kept asking myself, what now? One evening, Sophie and I sat on my couch sipping tea. She looked at me with that familiar mix of love and challenge. "Rach, you've spent your whole life waiting for their permission to live. Why not give yourself permission instead?" Her words echoed in my head for days. Then, one morning, as I flipped through the mail, I noticed a flyer tucked among the bills. Vacation deals. Hawaii packages now available. My heart skipped. Hawaii, the very trip they had tried to erase me from. For a moment, I hesitated. Could I really do it? Could I face those beaches, those sunsets, alone? But then another thought rose, louder than my fear. Why should they own Hawaii? Why should their cruelty steal that dream from me? That afternoon, I opened my laptop and booked a ticket. One seat, one name, mine. The weeks leading up to the trip felt different than any preparation I'd ever done. This time, I wasn't stuffing money into an envelope for a seat at someone else's table. This time, every dollar, every choice was for me. I bought a swimsuit that made me feel beautiful, not invisible. I picked out a dress I'd once thought was too much, but now felt exactly right. Each purchase was a declaration. I deserve this. When the day came, I boarded the plane with a mix of nerves and exhilaration. For once, no one rolled their eyes at me. No one told me I didn't belong. As the plane lifted off the ground, I pressed my forehead against the window and whispered, "This is mine." Hawaii was more than I ever imagined. The moment I stepped off the plane, warm air wrapped around me like an embrace I'd been waiting for my entire life. The scent of salt and hibiscus flowers filled my lungs, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe deeply. On the first morning, I walked barefoot along the beach as the sun rose, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. The waves lapped at my ankles, cool and steady, like a rhythm reminding me of my own heartbeat. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I am enough." I always was. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't the tears of pain I had shed so many nights in Michigan. They were tears of release. I spent days exploring, hiking lush trails, snorkeling in clear waters, tasting foods I couldn't even pronounce. At night, I sat on the balcony of my small hotel room, the ocean stretching endlessly before me. And for the first time, I wasn't haunted by my family's voices. Their laughter, their mockery, their accusations, all of it seemed to dissolve into the tide. One evening, I joined a group tour to watch the sunset from a cliffside. I ended up sitting beside a woman from Oregon and a couple from Canada. We shared snacks, traded stories, and laughed as if we'd known each other for years. When they asked about my trip, I simply said, "It's my first time here." A trip I gave myself, and in that moment, I realized how powerful those words were. I gave myself. By the end of the week, I didn't just feel like a tourist. I felt reborn. The Hawaii my family had once tried to keep from me had become the Hawaii I claimed for myself. A symbol of freedom. A declaration that I didn't need their invitation to exist, to belong, to be happy. On my last night, I stood alone on the beach, the moonlight shimmering across the waves. I thought about the little girl I once was, the one who sat at kitchen tables waiting for someone to remember her birthday, the one who clutched ribbons no one celebrated, the one who begged for scraps of love. I whispered to her, "We made it." They tried to erase us, but here we are. The ocean roared back, steady and infinite. And for the first time, I believed it. I was whole. When my plane touched down in New York, I wasn't the same woman who had left. I was lighter, freer, stronger. My parents hadn't changed, and maybe they never would. But I had. And that was enough. Because family isn't just the people who share your blood. Family is the people who see you, choose you, and stand with you. And most importantly, family begins with yourself. And that's how I finally broke free. For years, I believed I was the forgotten child, destined to live in the shadows of my family's golden children. But Hawaii taught me something they never could. I was never broken. I was never less. I was always enough. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been pushed aside or told you don't belong, I want you to remember this. Your worth isn't defined by the people who refuse to see you. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying others, it's rebuilding yourself. Thank you for staying with me through my journey. If my story spoke to you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories, the place where we uncover the raw truth about betrayal, justice, and the strength it takes to fight back. Drop a comment below and let me know. What part of Rachel's story hit you the hardest? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, remember family is not just blood. Family is love, respect, and the choice to stand together. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.